Okay, so here's how we made our wooden wall divider. All of the wood pieces came from Lowe's. We used the Select Pine because it was nice, straight, sharp edges, and really didn't need much sanding at all. So before we got the wood, we measured the distance that we needed for the wall divider. We put it right up against here, against this wall. We also had to make sure to cut a little piece of the floor out of the way so we could put the wall divider directly on the floorboards on this edge. And we measured such that each of these pillars, each of these posts, is 4 inches apart. That way it's a safety thing. Kids can't accidentally fall through and hit their head or get stuck. 4 to 4.5 inches is fairly standard for railing balusters, railing balusters as well. So each of these posts is a 2x2 of Select Pine. The floor piece is also a 2x2. The reason why we used a 2x2 on the floor was so that we could have a nice transition between the floor piece and the vinyl plank flooring using quarter round. We could just nail it straight in. For the ceiling piece, we used a 1x2. We chose to use a slightly thinner piece for the ceiling just to make it a little bit easier to work with. So one of the difficulties with installing this divider is that our house is old. The floor as well as the ceiling aren't exactly level, and certainly not level with each other. So when we measured and cut each of these posts, we had to measure floor to ceiling exactly in their spot so that we could handle any variance in height. And if I recall correctly, there was at least about a ½ inch, if not a little bit more, of difference between some of the heights of these posts. So cutting was actually fairly easy. Once we numbered each post, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and where its position was. We measured the height floor to ceiling. Then we would take it outside and cut it with a circular saw. If we needed any small adjustments, like we were a millimeter too thick or something, we would use a jam saw just to shave off a little bit more to get it perfectly in place. When each post was cut and measured properly, we would bring it in here, size it to make sure it was good. Then we would screw and glue it into the bottom and top pieces. If you look very, very closely, you'll see that we cut the bottom and top pieces essentially in half. If we had built it all as one piece, it would have been too big to bring in the door and install in place. So we broke it into halves, so we assembled outside, brought it in here, and put them in place one after the other. So here you can see our construction site outside, just outside the front door, near where the divider goes in the house. We put newspaper down to protect the wood against grass and dirt stains and bugs. So the process of assembly is pretty simple. You just take the posts one at a time and screw and glue them perpendicularly into that ceiling piece there at the end. We use 2 construction screws to protect it from twisting. And when we put the screw on, we make sure to add a little bit of wood glue in there just to keep it extra secure. We also used an extra piece of wood underneath of that ceiling piece, and you'll also see that we put an extra piece to prop up the post ends just to keep them up, make it a little easier to work with. But the process is pretty straightforward. You just screw and glue one at a time, 4 inches apart, everything pre-measured. This is of course after we measured each individual numbered piece to make sure they're in the right place. Once you do it on the top, then we did it on the bottom. Everything parallel. As you can see also, this is the first section of 2 sections. It was easier to get them in if we split them in half rather than having one giant piece that wouldn't fit in the front door. So now here we're doing the second section, and it's the same process. Sometimes we had a little bit of excess glue coming out the sides, so we had to wipe it off. And here you can see we were using a jam saw just to get that one extra piece in place because it was a little bit too long. Now we're just making sure everything is good and even. Final pieces. Great. And so then here's us moving it into the house. We already got the first one on. As I said before, we pre-measured everything on the floor and the ceiling. And so when we attached it to the floor, we would use construction screws to go straight down into the floorboards. And when we attached it to the ceiling, we used fairly heavy-duty drywall anchors in a few key spots. Everything was lined up, so it's nice right angles everywhere. And here, we're just getting the last little pieces in place, making sure it's nice and even. And there you have it. We have our nice, beautiful wall divider in place, and it looks great. After we screwed it in, the last things we did were we stained it. We used a very light stain, the same one we used on our butcher block, and just ran up and down all the posts along the floor and the ceiling. So it has a nice, even coat all the way through. So, we hope you liked our video. Please remember to subscribe to our channel, and feel free to drop any questions in the comments below. Thank you very much.